Welcome to the channel and welcome back if you're a return viewer. You're watching the Christchurch Review of Books and I am Kerry. Today I'm hoping to do just a quick review of this book which has been taking up my time the last 2 or 3 weeks. That is Terry Pratchett, A Life with Footnotes by Rob Wilkins. Now, my relationship with the works of Terry Pratchett go back to the early 80s when I got hold of a copy of a magazine called, I think it was Space Voyages or Star Voyages. It was a UK magazine which kind of covered all my interests that I had at the time: science fiction, space exploration, the nascent industry of home computers, video games, all that type of thing. It was all in one package, so it was an amazing find to find that it was a magazine covering that. And in the, I think the very first issue of it that I obtained was a review of a book called The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett. Now the reviewer seemed to think that, here at last was the fantasy equivalent of Douglas Adams's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. And because I tended to read those magazines back to back over and over again, because they were rare and exotic beasties back in those days for us here, Terry Pratchett and The Colour of Magic in the Discworld thing became ingrained in my mind, although I hadn't read it at that point. Later on, I discovered his 2 pre-Discworld books at the local library. I think it was Strata and The Dark Side of the Sun. I read those, thought they were okay, didn't give them much thought. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I actually read a Discworld book. I started with The Colour of Magic, even though people say that's not a typical Discworld book. Philip followed it up with The Light Fantastic, which is a direct sequel, and then I think it was Equal Rights. So it was the first 3 Discworld books, and I have to say, they didn't really trigger great feelings of fandom for me like I have with other people. I mean, I've known of people who've gone right down the fan rabbit hole with Terry Pratchett's Discworld books. They buy all the goods, buy all the books, buy all the figures, what have you. That kind of bypassed me, but over the years, as his sales increased and his massive empire based on the Discworld books grew, he had a certain reputation of being a really great guy. He was really engaged with his fans. He defended them against snobs who gave snide remarks about fantasy fans being nerds and all that type of stuff. And when he became wealthy, he used his wealth to help other people. And I think this decency of him became part of the whole package, and people would buy his books even more because of it. And so now we come to the biography. Now it's subtitled The Official Biography, and it's written by Rob Wilkins, who was it started out as Terry Pratchett's personal assistant, like dog's body, and he became a close friend, and then he ended up physically writing a lot of his books as Terry decided to dictate them. And then when his health problems increased, Rob Wilkins became like the chief wrangler of the stories. Anyway, Rob Wilkins has taken on the task to write the official biography, so we know it's going to be a bit limited in what it can say, I assume. First half of the book is really a story of Pratchett's childhood, his family background, the mentions of the class system and coming from humble beginnings, his school days and the various teachers which thought he was a good-for-nothing little sod, teachers who told him he'd never amount to anything, all that type of thing, his school friends, and some that he remained in touch with for the rest of his life, and follows him through to about age 11, where he was really not that much of a reader, but I think at age 10 or 11, someone gave him a copy of The Wind in the Willows. He read that, and that seemed to open his eyes to the world of reading. And soon he was devouring the contents of his local library, and he developed a love for science fiction. And that he decided to even write his own science fiction stories, and that led him into the world of organised fandom. And he attended some science fiction conventions in other towns around the UK, and yeah, that kind of fired his engine into becoming a writer, but first he had to go through his normal career, so he became a cadet journalist, learnt all the ways of journalism from local newspaper writers. Then from journalism he went on to public relations, and he actually worked for a nuclear power concern, publicising nuclear power. And it's only then that his writing enabled him to become a full-time writer, and that kind of ends the first half of the book. It's a rags to riches type thing, well, not really riches at that stage, but Harry became a writer, and his massive imagination and his sense of humour all kind of sparked early on, and developed into something that we all came to know. Now, the second half of the book really is when Wilkins comes into the picture. He's a kind of assistant, like I said, but he becomes so much more. He becomes a friend to Terry and Terry's family. Pratchett relies on him for a lot of things, and soon they're working on the stories together. Pratchett has a habit of having fragments of about 6 or 7 stories on the go at a time, and when he's writing one, he'll cherry pick from his mind and from computer files he'd saved to add gags and scenes from one to another and so on. It was a complicated thing, but he managed to put out about 2 books a year at least, mainly the Discworld ones, although he did stray away from Discworld at times to write other standalone books. So the main focus of the book remains on Pratchett. Obviously, his family and friends kind of come and go. They have like walk-on parts, but you don't learn too much about them. Only people in the publishing industry, which enabled his career to flourish, really. And together Wilkins and Pratchett saw Pratchett's book sales go into the millions. He became a massive fan conventions and what have you about his work, the Discworld books. And it all kind of snowballed into this massive behemoth of a thing which Pratchett was almost unable to control himself. He had to have other companies helping him merchandise and whatever, but he wanted his final approval on it all himself. And Wilkins was there for the ride. And the second half of the book is a lot of accounts of them working together in the room they called the chapel at Pratchett's home, where all the writing got done, and they mucked around a lot together as well. They had a lot of fun together. And final section of the book is gets a bit darker, a bit more serious, where Pratchett is diagnosed with a form of Alzheimer's disease, and there's a steady decline of his functions and his mind and his physical body. And it's very sad, the last section of the book. It made me feel quite deeply sad for a man who I obviously did not know personally, but it was when he finally dies in this book, it is quite a heart-rending moment. Wilkins has a lot to say about it afterwards, about the funeral and what have you, but like I said, the ending of this book is very sad. Even if you didn't really know or love Pratchett's work, I'd say it's hard to keep a dry eye if you read this section. As for the stories about the man himself, he's portrayed almost entirely in a positive light in this book. I won't call it a hagiography, but it's obvious that Wilkins still thinks highly of the man, even throughout so many years after his death. There's not too much negative stuff being said about him, and if he does make a lapse and gets bad-tempered or something, he's always excused a few pages later for having a good reason. So that's the book. It's a pretty straightforward story of Pratchett's life and then his work. They discuss on individual books of his books and which ones he ended up not liking himself, and the backstories behind certain books, which ones he thought were his most important works and which ones went down well with the fans and all that type of thing. We don't see much of a dark side of Pratchett, and maybe he didn't have one. He seemed to be an admirable fellow. Like I said earlier, he was always very generous with his time and money, and he raged against injustice in the world, and he incorporated that into his books, and that kind of fueled the success of the books. That people saw the message that he was trying to push, and that all combined into the Discworld mythos, and people loved it. People really love it, and today they still love it. And as a result of reading this book, I have actually ordered a couple more of his Discworld novels to see what the fuss is about. I've read the first 3, and they didn't really strike any great chord with me. They were kind of workmanlike pieces of humour and fantasy, but those in the know say that he really takes off when he's got an issue to push or an injustice to fight, and a lot of the later books do contain that type of thing. As for this book, it is entertaining enough. I dipped in and out of it over a couple of weeks. There was enough humour, enough light-hearted stuff amongst the serious stuff to keep you entertained, just, you know, an hour each night before bed or something. It's a great read. Whatever you thought of Terry Pratchett, whether you're a fan or you just heard of him in the news or something, there's enough in there to interest the most casual reader. So that is Terry Pratchett, A Life with Footnotes by Rob Wilkins. We'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed the review and have a good day.